Hi, Sice. Thank you for joining me on the podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing all right, thank you. Yeah, very well, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to get to speak to you. Obviously, frontman of the Boo Radleys. And with my guests, I like to go back to the start. So,
Hmm.
what was your childhood like, and when did you get into music?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've actually sort of written about this from a kind of psychological perspective, because music, I think, is one of my earliest memories. From a psychological perspective, when you kind of remember early memories, one of the things that you know that they're very, very early is that they're from a very low perspective, because you're going to be Diddy. And then I remember being very small, and my mum and dad they didn't have a big record collection at all. They had a kind of, I think it was a covers album, somebody, the King singers do Simon and Garfunkel or the Beatles, this kind of thing. But I remember sort of dancing around and really loving that. And so music was just something that I loved from a very early age. And then really it was, growing up late 70s, Top of the Pops was just like a religion. It was that was where it would just, I had two older brothers. So every Thursday, Top of the Pops was watched religiously. So it was just, that just became my life at that point. That became like the weekly thing. Uh, and I think we'd listen to the chart show on a Sunday and kind of probably tape stuff off the chart. So as soon as I was sort of, I don't know, 8 or 9, music was like a big, big thing. And I think even from that point, that was one of the things that I just knew that was going to be my life. That was what I kind of wanted to be involved in. That was what I wanted to do.
You mentioned there, Top of the Pops. The
Mm,
guests that I have on a group around that time say
mm,
like it was the holy grail, like for music and
yeah.
things. What was it like when you actually played on the show?
Well, it was weird. We did it sort of 1995, I think. So it was kind of it was pretty much the same format. And the first time we did it, it was incredible. It was absolutely amazing. It was just like, wow, this is it. This is the big time kind of thing. Um, After that, it kind of got a bit dull, because it's the same thing. I think that was one of the things that I found out about the sort of, I guess, the fame game in the music business is that you end up doing the same thing a lot of the time, and that wasn't as much fun. Novelty, newness, adventure, that's all great, but sort of doing the same thing over and over, in Elstree, it kind of lost its appeal really, really quickly. But I think that's life, really. Anything you do it enough times, it's going to become a bit dull. But the first time we did it, it was just, yeah, it was absolutely incredible. It was amazing. Yeah.
I think I've heard you say before as well, like once you got that fame and success, it
Mm.
wasn't how you expected. Is that kind of the same with the Top of the Pops then later on? Like it
Well,
just
yeah. This is the thing about it, is that the problem is when you imagine a future for yourself, you kind of you and we all do this, that that we fixate on an outcome. So the outcome is kind of like, I want to be on Top of the Pops, but we don't think about what the process of that is, which basically means, for being on Top of the Pops, it basically means hanging around a studio in Elstree all day, and then you kind of mime to your record, and in reality that's quite dull. And I think that's one of the things that was there about everybody wants to be famous, but nobody really thinks about the reality of what that means. And I think one of the things that we sort of, or certainly me personally, was that photo shoots, videos, all the kind of stuff that you do, it's really not that interesting. Standing around having your photo taken, it's a bit of a waste of time, to be honest. And it's kind of, so it's those kind of things that I think I was sort of never really, I never thought about the reality of them. I was always enamored with the kind of the outcome of it. And everybody's like that. You think, wouldn't it be great to be famous? Well, No, not when you kind of, I look and think about, people like Robbie Williams, Oasis, those kind of things. It's like, God, it must be awful to not able to go to a restaurant and eat your dinner, and so, we think about those things. We think fame would be great, but nah, it's not really. I wouldn't want it.
Like you say, it's like with anything in life. Once you get something you've been after,
Mm.
like the journey there is more exciting than getting there, and
Absolutely, yeah, that, and it does take a little while to learn that. That was one of the things, and I think first time round, when you're in your early 20s, it takes a while to kind of learn that actually, yeah, the getting there is far more fun. And I think, being older, I think you do sort of get to appreciate that. You do get to kind of like, actually, it's the doing of it that's more important rather than the sort of the arriving there. It's a cliche, but yeah, it's the destination rather than the arriving that's the fun thing.
well, so with the Boo Radleys, how did that
Mm.
band start?
Well, I mean, so essentially it was born out of me and Martin's friendship. So me and Martin, who was our guitarist, we were friends and we sort of bonded probably first over football, then about the Beatles, and then sort of laughter. We used to make each other laugh, um, and we knew we wanted to be in a band, but it was kind of a fantasy for us for ages. We would do all the things, we would interview each other and we would do pretend concerts and stuff. But we were actually sort of quite old before we actually sort of got around to sort of getting guitars as Christmas presents, really cheap shit from the Littlewoods catalogue, and learned to sort of play them. But as soon as we learned to play them, one of the things that we did was start writing songs, and that was we weren't proficient at all, but as soon as we knew three or four chords, it was like, right, we're writing songs here. And I think we were drawn towards the melodic side of things. I think that's what we were good at. We were terrible musicians, but we could write songs. And so there was this other band, there was this other group of musicians in school, and we knew them, they were friends, and they were good musicians, but their songs weren't brilliant. They were like a funk band. And Tim, our bass player, was in them. He was playing guitar for them, and we basically kind of co-opted him and said, "Oh, come and play bass for us." So that was it, really. That was about 1985, I think, when we were about 15. We started doing stuff around then, 85, 86. And then it was the kind of, the typical thing. We never gave up. There's always a lot of bands that form when you're 15 or 16, but I think we were all of a mind that we're not giving up with this, and we just kind of kept going. Started playing more small clubs in Liverpool, and it just kind of gradually increased from there. We just never gave up.
Like you said there, once you knew a few chords, you started writing songs.
Mm.
You and Martin, but then Martin went on to be like the main songwriter. What
Mm.
happened with you writing the songs?
Well, it's a good question. I don't really know, is the honest truth. I mean, I think Martin was very sort of independent in his songwriting, so I think he wasn't really keen on working on other people's songs. We would produce songs for the band, but it didn't kind of happen after a certain stage. And I think we just accepted that. Tim used to write songs as well, and I think we just kind of accepted that was the way it was. I did keep up songwriting. I made a solo album in '95, and so there were songs there. I don't know. Is we look back and just kind of think, yeah, why did it go like that? I think Martin wasn't. I think Martin was always a kind of solo artist at heart. I look back and think, he kind of wanted things to be sort of his stuff produced by other people, whereas I think me and Tim were always more collaborative about it. We always kind of wanted to be in a band. So I think you just kind of go with the flow at the time, and only afterwards you kind of look back and think, yeah, why did we stop? Our songs being that it got to a certain point, I think, after the first couple of records, when it was just Martin's songs, that you kind of felt, well, I don't want to rock the boat and start kind of arguing, and it was more about kind of keeping the peace, then we were never a sort of we were never a band that would kind of have outright arguments. You know, we were never like that. So so we just kind of accepted it.
You mentioned you started playing gigs around Liverpool. Can you remember
Mm.
your first gig and the early gigs and what they were like?
Well, yeah, we were talking about this the other day, weirdly, because one of the things I don't know how it came about, but one of the weird things was we played this like after show party at the Liverpool Playhouse. The Liverpool Playhouse was a theatre at the time, and I don't know how we got involved with it, but we had a demo tape that was quite had a couple of songs on it that was quite nice. But this demo tape, that had a couple of our songs on it, wasn't really like what we become. You know, we'd become a lot more sort of grungy and dirty. And so we did this kind of after show party at the Liverpool Playhouse. And I think they absolutely hated us. You know, it was like, what the hell is this kind of thing? What did happen was that there was a few clubs around Liverpool that we started going to just to enjoy. So there was Planet X, Crazy House, there was Yesterdays, there was another one that I can't remember. But there was a few of those that we used to sort of basically rotate with a few Liverpool bands at the time. There was like us, Dr. Fibes, Attic Head, and Barbell, and lots of these, Ricky Spontaine. There were lots of these kind of Liverpool bands, and we were part of that scene that just basically kind of yeah, rotated around on each other's bills, just would play, would support each other. And then we were noticed by it was a record label in Preston, actually, Action Records, and the guy there, Gordon, was just really nice and just said, you know, if you want to make vinyl, I'll fund, you know, 1,000 copies of vinyl. And really the thing that took off from there, you know, God bless him, the person that always saw bands through was John Peel. You know, as soon as we sent a copy to John Peel, he played it, and that was kind of it. You know, we were then, record companies were getting in touch then, so then it was kind of, wow, this is happening now. You know, so but we spent a couple of years supporting bands, playing support, you know, local clubs. It was pretty grim, but it's, you know, it was good fun.
I'd look back on those early days, like we said, with the building up to the success. Looking back now,
Mm.
how do you feel about those early days?
Uh, I mean, I think they were important for us. I think we were sort of learning a lot, but I think I don't know. It's a very good question. You know, I think it was. I look back and I think it was pretty grim. But the thing that was very, very important was that we had the space to do that. And I think one of the things that, you know, I feel for bands these days, because what we were doing was basically for a couple of years, we were existing on income support, but it meant that we were able to really focus on the music. It meant we were able to sort of, you know, do gigs at the drop of a hat and kind of really focus. And we didn't have to try and have a job at the same time. I mean, a couple of us did, but it, you know, it was one of those things that just allowed a bit of growth of the band, and there wasn't any expectations that we would sign and that we would do stuff. It was just a case of, right, let's do this, let's do what you're interested in, let's learn the songwriting craft, let's learn how you kind of deal with live shows, those kind of things. It was a bit of a learning period that I think a lot of bands, a lot of musicians need and don't necessarily get, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, what was it like signing to a Rough Trade?
So that was the thing that was really, really exciting, because and that came directly out of John Peel, you know. So that was the next big step. As soon as we got played by John Peel, we were contacted by Rough Trade. That was amazing because, you know, I was a huge Smiths fan, so, you know, so I knew they were on Rough Trade, and so that was just enormous, you know, to be like, wow, you know, signing to the Smiths and, you know, the Smiths label. It was yeah, that was absolutely brilliant, and that was kind of like, wow, okay, we end up in a recorded studio. You know, we've done demos and stuff, but this was like proper recording studio, proper vinyl, I think CDs and stuff. So it was just, yeah, that was the start of it, really. That was like, wow, this is proper, you know. And we ended up doing support tours and things, you know, supporting the Wedding Present. So all these bands that we really loved, and we supported My Bloody Valentine and bands. So that felt like we were stepping into the world that we'd looked on from afar, and kind of getting the music press reviews and interviews and those kind of things. It was like, wow, we're in. This is really exciting. Those days were really exciting, yeah, because you were always doing these firsts, and that was brilliant.
What happened with the end of Rough Trade though?
Well, basically, I mean, I think what happened was is that we released three EPs on Rough Trade. They were very sort of nurturing, and I think Jeff Kraft was basically kind of saying, "Yeah, release three EPs." We went into a studio to record the first album, which is called "Everything's All Right Forever," and then we just I don't remember a lot about it, but I remember we got word through the grapevine. Basically, I think Jeff Kraft told us that basically, Rough Trade was going down. It wasn't. It was going into it was, I don't know whether they declared bankruptcy, but they stopped operating as a record label just basically because they run out of funds. And so, but the strange thing was is that it didn't really bother us at the time, because I think straight away what happened was is that our manager, a manager at the time, also managed a band called Slowdive, who was signed to Creation. So straight away he just went into Creation Records, and basically said to Alan McGee, look, the album's recorded, it's recorded, it was recorded for Rough Trade. Rough Trade's gone. If you pay the recording costs, I think it was like 25 grand or something, then you can have the album. And I think Alan just went, yeah, fine, okay, no worries. And that was it, really. So it was a strange signing. It was a strange sort of shift sideways, rather than had Rough Trade not gone down, I don't know what would have happened, but we ended up on Creation at that point, so that was great.
Yeah, you were on Creation throughout the 90s. What was it like, that record label? Obviously, there's the stories of all the crazy stuff. Was it like that?
Well, it was a weird one. I think, yeah, it was kind of, it was a mad place to be, and there were a lot of mad characters. We sort of dipped in and out of it because we were sort of we were based in Liverpool up until sort of, I don't know, 94. I moved to London. So for the first couple of years on Creation, the first year on Creation, we would dip into it for weekends and stuff, and it was all a bit bewildering because there were just these mad characters around. Yeah, a lot of drugs, a lot of drinking. McGee was just off his tits constantly, so he was, you could tell, he was speeding off his nut. He was just going constantly, so there was this, so it was great because it was like, wow, there's this energy. So it was a brilliant label to be on. It was really, really exciting. It had that fabulous story, that it started off and it was like an indie darling and produced some of the, the great records of the 90s. And then of course, Oasis happened and it all changed. It all went stratospheric, and it was kind of a different experience then, really. And so we sampled it for a couple of years. Once Oasis sort of took off about, I don't know, 96, I think. Excuse me. The problem was it then just became another record label, and then it was a shame. It kind of killed it from that point on. There was the same. There was, Alan was there, Dick Green was there, but the problem was the funny thing about how Creation was in the initial thing was Alan would just give anybody a job, any girl he fancied, anybody he talked to, he'd just go, right, you can do marketing and stuff. So it was just full of all these people who basically sort of didn't know what they were doing, and it was all a bit crazy, it was all a bit chaotic, it was all a bit that kind of do it yourself kind of ethos. And the problem was is that once I think it was basically once they sort of got licensed to Sony, or Sony took over 50%, 51%, it became a serious record company, and so it dampened it down. And then Oasis going the way they did, it just basically became a sort of normal record label then, which was a shame because it lost its kind of idiosyncrasies.
I've heard you say before, like they started putting like bodyguards on the doors and stuff. Didn't they? It started becoming too serious.
Well, that was the shame of it, because because it was great that you would just, if you were kind of bored or not doing stuff, you could just wander down and chat to the people who work there, some of these kind of maverick people, and then just go to the pub. And yeah, the problem was is that the bodyguards on the door was mainly about the paparazzi. I think it was like they were always hanging. Neil and Noel and Liam became such a story that, you know, the paparazzi were always hanging around waiting to sort of and would get into creation, so that all had to stop, which was, yeah, it was a real shame really, because it kind of did put, you know, it put a stop to that kind of that friendly nature of it. You know, that was always the good thing about it, is that with creation it was kind of like the people were lovely, the people were friendly, there was never any sort of big egos and stuff, and then it sort of it just went by the wayside really. But you know, everything ends.
You always had your success, like with Wake Up, the
Mm,
album and stuff. But you know, before that, when Oasis like biggest band in the world, and
mm.
obviously still on the same label, when Oasis are the biggest band in the world, are they treat differently to the other bands on a record label? Like, what happens there?
Well, I don't. I mean, I think part of the thing was is that we were all sort of. I think we enjoyed it for a while. You know, I think it was. I think everybody sort of sees Nebworth as the point when it all sort of collapsed. Really, I think that's the weird thing, because you know we were introduced to Oasis, you know, early on. The thing about creation was is that, you know, it really was a lovely place. Everybody got on, and you know, whenever they signed a new band, you were you were really friendly towards them, you know. And so like we were mates with, you know, 18 Wheeler and Swerve Driver and Teenage Fan Club, and you know, and all these other bands. We ran Ride and stuff, you know, we played with them, we played together, we chatted, we all liked the same stuff. Everybody was really good. And so when they said, oh, we signed this band called Oasis, you know, we were like, okay, great, you know, and we played with them really early on. I think before they'd even released the first single in Glasgow Sound City. I think they supported us, and they supported us in Preston as well. So you know, and they were really lovely guys, and you know, it was no different. It was like, yeah, they were a great band, really lovely guys. And then the sort of, you know, the climb started, and I think for a lot of it, it was just like, wow, this is fucking brilliant, you know. And then it was like they're making great records and they're part of our gang, and it's like, I think there was just this kind of vicarious thrill that we got from it, that was like, yeah, this is brilliant, you know, part someone from our gang is like, you know, ruling the world kind of thing. um and then everybody was kind of enjoying the kind of the ride, you know. So Nebworth would have a huge creation tent that, you know, because you were assigned to creation, you got access to, and you know, you got to get into Nebworth, and there was fleets of limousines and all these kind of things. So it was just like, wow, yeah, this is real good fun. I think after that there was a sort of, I think post Nebworth there was the hangover
Mm.
period, I think, which was just, I don't know, I think there was something about, I mean, things weren't going great for us in the wake of that, because I don't know, Oasis kind of brought with it a sort of a turn away from the kind of experimentalism and kind of, I don't know, I don't know. It was the downside of Britpop, I guess, that kind of meant that if you didn't sort of sound like that anymore, you weren't going to fit in. And I think what happened was that you know, I think the people at Creation all got a bit jaded. I know Alan did. You know, Alan was fed up, and I think we were kind of fed up at the same time as well. So it kind of, we all kind of followed that trajectory, I think,
Mm.
through the 90s. You know, I think a lot of bands did, and then kind of it kind of died away. It's an interesting kind of narrative to look back and see, yeah, that's essentially kind of the way it went, you know, and it was quite good fun.
You mentioned there like you had to sound like Oasis, obviously back
Mm,
with the Britpop scene. I wanted to ask you about that because your first two albums are
mm,
different to Wake Up, and then
mm,
you've got like Verve, Urban Hymns was different to their
mm,
early stuff. Great Escape was different to Blur's early stuff.
mm.
So were you subconsciously like changing your genres, or was it to like you had to stay to survive?
Well, I mean, I think really, you know, that is how we've always operated, was we always wanted, you know, to make a different sounding album. And you know, our model was always the Beatles. You know, you look at the Beatles, and the most amazing thing about them wasn't their sort of success or that kind of thing. It was the way that every album changed. You know, they did something different on every album, and you know, you can really hear the development, and that's what we wanted to do. I mean, I think it was the Britpop thing kind of coincided with us of an attempt to make a more, I guess, commercial album, because that's what was kind of required of us. Not because that was a bad thing, but because we'd reached that point in our sort of development. You know, Giant Steps was the album that was kind of critically lauded, but it didn't sell any copies. You know, we sold very few copies, despite, you know, everyone saying it was album of the year and this kind of thing. It didn't sell a lot of copies, so there was pressure from us, pressure from creation, pressure from sort of everybody really to do something that was more commercial. That's the weird thing, is that, you know, what was lost around or what lost or gained around 94, 95, I think, was an independence ethos, where before, you know, we were very, you know, indie was an actual thing. You know, it meant that you were independent from major record labels. Now it's become a sort of genre, but then it meant that you were independent from record labels, and actually you didn't care about the mainstream charts and those kind of things. That changed, and I think that's what happened for a lot of bands, was that suddenly it became, well, actually, you've got to get in the mainstream charts, you know, or actually, and a lot of the creation wouldn't have done it necessarily, but I think the threat was there, which is like, you'll be dropped. You know, if you don't get in the charts, you're not financially viable. There are other bands out there. You know, this is the thing where you sort of, unfortunately, you remember that the music business is a business, and that's when it starts to come into it. And I think it did start to come into that for creation. So that was part of the thing. So there was, I mean, with Wake Up, we wanted to make a different album. We wanted to make a pop album because we'd always loved pop music. You know, like I said, one of the things about loving Top of the Pops and the chart rundown early on is you get into pop music. It's not necessarily rock or indie or any of those things. You get into pop music. So Wake Up was our kind of a bit of a love letter to pop music. But we never intended to kind of stay with that. You know, we kind of wanted, like, let's make a pop record, and then next album we'll do something a bit different. You know, we'll kind of make something a bit more experimental. So that was kind of the thinking behind it.
Well, those first two albums especially, I think, are brilliant. Everything's All Right Forever and Giant Steps.
Thank you.
Like Skyscraper, I think that's one of your best songs.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, weird you should say that, but we're going to revive that for the next tour, that song.
Really?
Yeah. Somebody shouted for it when we played in France about a month ago. Somebody shouted, Tim started playing the bass line, and we were like, yeah, we should do that. So we'll probably do it for the next tour.
Yeah, like I said, brilliant albums. They're a bit more like shoegazy, weren't they?
Yeah. Well, that was it. I mean, those albums were very much sort of our influences at the time. You know, I mean, the bands that we sort of really loved were, you know, Pixies, My Bloody Valentine. You know, we like the independent bands. You know, we like Cocteau Twins, we like Dinosaur Jr. And so, you know, when you're starting off, that's kind of what we were sort of drawn towards. It was only really sort of post Giant Steps or around Giant Steps really that we started to kind of go, okay, that's us. You know, we can really just be us instead of trying to make it something else, you know. But I think most bands start off like that or continue like that, you know, kind of, you know, wearing their influences quite heavily. And then they lighten as you go. You know, you kind of like, okay, well, we don't really need to have, you know, it's something that you sort of lean into and let go of later on.
What was it like for you when Wake Up went to number one? Can you remember it getting to number one? Like where?
Yeah, the album, yeah, absolutely. The bizarre thing was that I can't remember why we were there, but we were actually in Wallasey, where we came from. We were doing, I think we were doing a photo shoot up there or something. I can't really remember why we were there. So we were in Martin's house when Dick Green from Creation phoned up to tell us that it had gone to number one. And yeah, it was an unbelievable moment. I mean, it was kind of, yeah, still difficult to fathom, really. You know, that was like, wow, a number one album. I mean, still, you know, it's still sort of a huge achievement when you look back at it, you know, to think, wow, that's amazing. And there was a lot of competition around that in those days, you know. So yeah, it was it was absolutely amazing. But it passed very quickly. You know, it was kind of part of the sort of way that you operated back then was always right, next thing, bigger, better, you know, which wasn't necessarily a good thing. We never had time to stop and smell the roses, but that's kind of the way it was. It was like, right, great, on to the next thing, you know.
You
Yeah.
mentioned you mentioned you felt pressure though from yourselves and creation to have
Mm,
a hit album or hit single.
mm,
Then when you do get the hit album at number one,
mm.
do you have pressure then to follow it up?
Well, yeah. I mean, well, not no. I mean, not from creation. I mean, you know, give them their due. No, they were quite happy. And what happened was is that I think we were led into a false sense of security or false sense of belief about where we were as a band. Because what happened was is that, you know, obviously Wake Up Boo was an enormous hit single. And so the album really sold on the back of that. And we assumed that that meant that, you know, if the album sold, you know, 300,000 copies, we thought, wow, we've got 300,000 fans who are all going to buy our next album. Of course, that wasn't the case. You know, these were kind of almost your floating voters. So really, what we thought was, this is brilliant. You know, we've got all these people willing to hear us. Let's make something really sort of out there, experimental, you know, different, kind of adventurous. And so we went with that. And of course, what we were kind of realized is that people sort of felt it was difficult. It was kind of, you know, they thought we were kind of being deliberately difficult, and that really wasn't the case. You know, we just kind of we were following that Beatles thing of like, right, well, let's do something different, you know. You've done Revolver, let's do Sergeant Pepper. You know, you've done Sergeant Pepper, let's do Abbey Road. You know, it was kind of like, right, let's do something different. And we were really kind of, I look back and think that was quite demoralizing for us. I mean, I think we were always kind of right, we don't give up and we move on to the next thing. But I think we look back now and think actually that really knocked the wind out of us, because I think we all thought, and still do, that Come On Kids was a great album, and I still think it's my favorite of all our albums. That, you know, that's the one that I think, you know, that I love listening to, and that have a pride in.
Would you do anything differently looking back, or would you still release it?
I mean, I don't know. No, I wouldn't do anything differently, because I don't think you can. The only thing, no, I wouldn't have done. No, I don't think we could have done anything differently, really. You know, I think what was the other option? The other option was to just tread the same old stuff out again, try and I don't think that would have been the right thing to do. You know, I think it was just it was just time and place, and we as a band couldn't have just done what other people were doing, I guess. I mean, the problem is it wasn't so much, you know, Verve and Oasis and Blair and those bands as it was the sort of the bands that you sort of forget about. There was the morass of kind of things that were following through. You know, there was your Menswear and Northern Uproar and all these kind of, and you know, I'm not dissing these bands at all, but they were kind of, you know, the problem is that the major labels sort of turned their attention to indie bands, and you just kind of got this landslide of kind of bands that you sort of, I don't know, you just felt you were competing for space with, you know, and that was never our kind of thing.
Do you disagree with what Martin said that he had in mind to like alienate the fans with that album?
Did he say that? Did he say he wanted to alienate it?
I've read that somewhere. Yeah, yeah.
Uh, yeah, I'm I don't know whether that's accurate. If he did say that, I don't think he'd set about to alienate people. No, I don't think he did, because I think, you know, literally the first line of the album is "Come on, kids, don't do yourself down. Throw out your arms for a new sound." You know, and that's literally an exhortation to say, right, come on, get into this kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe there was a suspicion there that it would alienate, but I don't know. I mean, I don't think we ever really understood how well. I mean, the problem is that these things are always these things are always judged not necessarily on what the art itself is doing, but how it's received. So, for example, when OK Computer was first released by Radiohead, people saw that as kind of being, weird and out there and difficult to comprehend. They released Paranoid Android as the first single, and people were like, what the hell?
Yeah.
We want more of these kind of straightforward rock songs from bands. But because it became super successful, it gets reappraised,
Mm.
but because Come On Kids didn't get super successful, it's seen as difficult and awkward, and it's not accepted.
Well, apparently, Come On Kids like influenced OK Computer.
That's been said, but I'm not sure that's the case. I mean, I don't know where that came from. I mean, maybe I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, I think maybe they might have admired its ambition, but I doubt it influenced it really.
Apparently, what they were already recording, the scraps that when they heard the Come On Kids, and then it became
Yeah,
OK Computer.
I think someone's got a bit carried away there. I don't believe that. They would be lovely, but I don't believe that.
Well, at this time though, when the album's out,
Mm,
Britpop is coming to an end, like you mentioned with
mm,
Networth and everything.
yeah.
So with the album after, you sort of try to claw it back. If that
No, no. The thing about, I mean, it's a real shame, because the album after is a great album. It's very much Tim's album. I think what the album afterwards, King Size, is us losing interest, really. And
really,
it's yeah, I think it's a real. I mean, I barely went down the studio. I think Martin had already kind of moved on from that kind of songwriting. I think he was kind of doing it, but I think I think he wanted to, he was loving Aphex Twin and electronic stuff and wanted to already move into that kind of area. So I think really, the sad King Size sounds like a sort of a sad album to me because it's kind of feels like we were losing our interest. And it's such a shame because that's really why we split up, at that point. I kind of wish that someone had been there to kind of put their arm around our shoulder and say, lad, you're knackered, you're tired, you've been at this for, since you were 15. Take a few years away, go and do other stuff, and then see where you are, But I think at that point, we just felt, no, that's it, we need to split up. And so it was a very sort of final decision that but the big thing really was that Creation Records went down and we'd lost our home. And I think we had some discussions about, do we carry on, do we try and find another label, and I don't think anybody's heart was in it really. I mean, it was a shame because Tim's that King Size, that album, he was really working hard down at the studio and putting that album together and making it work and pushing it through, so he had the energy for it. I mean, that's what he loves. He loves the studio stuff. He loves being at the mixing desk and the control desk and stuff. So his energy kind of pushed us through to that. But at the end of that, the fact that Creation went down and they weren't really going to release that record. It got released, but not really. It kind of slid out. And I think that was the point that we just said, right, we'll stop. It's done. It just felt like a big red arrow pointing down and saying time to stop. And I think it was the time to stop, but maybe you look back and you think sliding doors moment, you think what might have happened had we just taken 2 or 3 years out and then kind of come back, but maybe not. I think it was good that it was encapsulated within that time. I think that was the good thing.
was it round at Martin's that you all went round and split? Was it like an amicable split?
It was, yeah. What it was that basically Martin, I think, as far as I remember, Martin phoned me and said, "I don't want to do this anymore," and that was a massive relief to me. I mean, I was quite unhappy, and I remember not wanting to be in the band anymore, but I was just really scared that I didn't want them to carry on without me. I thought, well, if I leave, maybe they'll just get another singer, and I don't want that. I wanted the band to end but I didn't feel that I could end it. Me leaving wouldn't necessarily have ended it. So it was kind of a relief when Martin said, "I want to end it." And yeah, we didn't. We didn't just want to. We thought the only way that we could do it is to have a meeting, and we arranged to all drive. Tim had not long had a baby. So yeah, as far as I remember, that was, yes, Tim had just had a baby. So we drove up to New Brighton, where he was living at the time, Wallasey, that kind of area. And we all met there, and we just kind of said, yeah, we don't want to do anymore. And I think I assumed that sort of Tim and Rob would kind of telegraph it, would kind of know that that was what was happening, but I think it came as a bit of a shock to them. And so it was a bit, it was fine, it was understood, and there were no arguments about it. But that was that, it was kind of done. And that was kind of it, really. Yeah, no, we still stayed friends. And I think, as Tim moved toward Northern Ireland about 6 months later, and we all up and went at a goodbye party, and yeah, we continued to see each other. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good then that you didn't fall out. That's usually what happens, and it usually ends pretty badly with bands like.
Well, yeah, it does. I mean, yeah. I mean, I think it, and there were plenty of times that could have happened. I suppose, the musician's life, the touring life, is a really tough one, and it does cause friction and difficulties. And there were plenty of times, one or other of us felt really shitty being in the band, but we always had that dedication of kind of moving forward. So yeah, it was nice that there wasn't any sort of acrimony, really.
Like you mentioned, you started when you were 15, and you mentioned like there at that point when you split, Tim's got a baby, obviously a family and things, and when families come into it, and obviously you're going to grow apart, aren't you? So it's not going to be that same mentality as it was like when you started.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I mean, and I think that was part of my reason for wanting it to end as well, because I knew I did want a family, but I couldn't imagine being away for months on end, away from a family. I couldn't imagine the touring life. And so the idea that we were stopping and then we could start a family was fine by me. I just didn't think the two things were compatible. I mean, they can be now, or that's got a lot better. I mean, I sort of did a sort of like a talk at a festival over in Belgium with Katie Mellower, hosting that about sort of being a parent and a musician at the same time. And these days, it's looked on a lot more favorably. You can do it, but back then it was just an impossibility. So it was just like, nah, that's not going to happen. Maybe it's a bit more possible now.
When the band split, did you spend some time at home, like as a stay-at-home dad?
Yeah, well, that was the thing, is that it was a weird one, because I'd never considered what life not being in a band would be like. I honestly didn't think about it and didn't expect it, really. So I was a bit sort of shell-shocked and a bit scared. And my wife, God bless her, was kind of like, well, I'll go out to work and you stay at home with the kids, which was an amazing experience. Really, really tough. And I did find it really difficult at times, but it was a really important experience. I think absolutely vital. It teaches you a lot about yourself. It teaches you a lot about, childhood development and people, and understanding relationships and those kind of things. It was really, really important. Yeah.
With Wake Up Boo, it's a massive song. It's in films and TV series and the radio, like you hear it all the time. It is a great song, but what do you think makes that your most popular? Like I said, I like Skyscraper. I think that's one of your best, but
yeah.
Why do you think that one is?
I think there's a few. I mean, if I was to pull it apart, I mean, I think it's, it is pure pop. It's what represents. It's what a lot of people would think about when they think about pop music. It's got a certain jauntiness to it. It's got an uplifting feel to it. I think the the brass stabs really kind of do it. I think its longevity is probably just to do with the fact that it's kind of like it just does really well on breakfast shows. It's like, I mean, I don't know whether Martin's sort of writing of the lyrics was sort of intentionally cynical to think about what's the most commercial thing you can possibly do. I don't know.
Apparently he wrote it watching Big Breakfast, and he like after an acid trip or something. So maybe that's why it's morning TV.
That's what he says. That's what he says. So yeah, no, I mean, that's possibly the case. I mean, I think part of the thing was, the weird thing about Wake Up Boo is that it was deliberately set out to be a pop song, and the song itself was a good song. But when we first demoed it, it was kind of it didn't have that kind of pumping kind of Motown beat to it, and that was what was changed really. So I think that's why, I think it's a very popular song, weirdly, because it doesn't really sound like us. It just sounds like a sort of a Motown record, a very poppy Motown record.
Yeah, it's a great song, and like you said, it's like perfect for like a film or something. Like somebody filming. Yeah, it's just perfect.
It's like, as soon as the sun comes out in springtime, it's all over local radio. It's perfectly kind of inoffensive and kind of pop music. Pop music was always meant to be a bit kind of ephemeral and a bit throwaway, and I think that's kind of what it is. It doesn't aim at trying to be anything super deep or kind of rocky. It's pop music.
What is your relationship like with the song? Do you still like playing it and hearing it, or do you get sick of it? Or
it's not so much sick of it as in it just passes me by now. I mean, when you played a song for sort of 30 odd years, and we pretty much play it at every performance we've ever done since it was released. We don't get pissy about it and say, oh, we're not playing it. It's just the thing about it is that for us it was just another song. It was, I always equate it, well, like everything I do with the Beatles. It's like Beatles wrote Obla Di Obla Da, Good Day Sunshine, Yellow Submarine, those kind of things, really catchy stuff, but they didn't become known for just that one song. And I always assumed that, that's why I never put any store in it. It was like, well, okay, this is just another song, and we'll make more and more songs, and this song will become just another song. You don't kind of know that you're going to become known for that one song, but that has its benefits, and that one song meant that we were able to carry on, make another couple of albums. It means that we still will get played on the radio today. It means that people still know our name. So we don't get sort of pissy about it and say I'm not going to play, but I barely notice it. It's just like, it's in the set, I sing it, but it kind of just passes me by. It's like I'm far more interested in playing, like say, Skyscraper, songs that we haven't played for a while, or new stuff, or one of the things that we've kind of done over the last couple of years is go back and revisit like Come On Kids, songs from Come On Kids, songs from Wake Up. We've kind of, that interests me more than it's really just because I've played it so much over the last 35 years that it's just like passes you by, as it would anybody. It's like if anybody had to sort of sing or listen to the same song every day for 35 years, that it would pass. You stop hearing it, basically.
I do always wonder that, like when you've got a big song, because people will expect you to play that anywhere.
Yeah. And we do, and we do, and we don't. It doesn't. I never really. I don't really understand why people get pissy about that. Really, it's just a case of people want to hear the song, we'll play the song. Yeah, it doesn't. It doesn't. I'm confident that it doesn't represent us. You have no control over the way people view you, and if they view us for that one song, nobody comes to a Boo Radley song just to hear Wake Up Boo. That's the thing, is that they'll enjoy it. Some people don't like it. A lot of our fans, don't like it. So we have a kind of I don't know, an ambivalent sort of relationship with it, but I don't have any problem at all playing it. It's a song and it's a good song.
Yeah, definitely. And like you say there, some people won't like the song, but then, like you said before, like you said, "Come On Kids" is your favorite album. It'll be some fans' favorite album. Like I asked you before, would you change anything? But you can't, can you? Because, like you said, it'll be some people's favorite.
Yeah. I mean, that's what's really good is that, we have a big range of fans. Some fans will be really in love with the early stuff. Everything's All Right Forever. Some fans really like that, or even the sort of early Rough Trade, very shoegazy stuff. Some people really love King Size, and that's the good thing about us, is that it's not just, the fans who like the music, the range of music, it's all different. Nobody comes and says, oh, that it's just that one album, like a lot of bands do have. Where we're quite fortunate is that the fans who do like us do seem to like the spectrum. And so I don't think Wake Up Boo's kind of damaged us in any way. I don't think it's been a problem. No.
It's like with the Beatles, like you said, like you compare to them, like the Beatles have got that many. It's crazy how they did it in a short space of time. But
it's amazing. Yeah, amazing.
Like you could, in whatever mood you're in, you've got a Beatles song or album.
Yeah, and that's it. And and it's that, it's that vast range that they have that is incredible. And the output over, God, what, 7 years? Is quite astonishing. The level, but it's like they don't get judged on Obla Da or Revolution Number 9 or any of those things. It's just, it is the kind of the range of what they've made, and I think that's where I don't I don't worry about that, because I'm proud of the range that we produced over that period of time as well. That's the good thing, is that if people say the Boo Radleys, I'll say, well, listen to all the albums, and you'll kind of get a sense of what we are.
Yeah, definitely. And like we said before, you split in '99. You were a stay-at-home dad for a while, but as well as being a musician, you've also got degrees in psychology. Like, how did that come about?
So that was the weird thing, is that like when my kids were older and going to school, so I did the stay-at-home dad thing, and when my kids were older and going to school, I was really lost, and I didn't really realize it at the time. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do with my life. I was like, oh my God, all I'd ever wanted to be was in a band, and that was no longer there. And essentially it kind of caused lots of problems with my wife, really. My wife was kind of saying, look, you need to do something. And I was terrified. And I just didn't know what to do, and so basically I sort of ended up in therapy. And like a lot of people who end up in therapy do, after a while I was like, well, I could do this, and was really interested in it. And I'd always been interested in psychology anyway. I was going to do a degree in psychology. So I went back to the local university while I was still sort of being a stay-at-home dad, but I went back and did the degree at the local university near Oxford. And then just carried on with it, got really interested in the therapy side, and then did another 3-year doctoral training, and then got qualified about 2014. So since 2014, I've been working as a psychologist. My day job's working as a psychologist. And I've also, recently kind of got involved with the music business again, doing stuff with working with musicians, working with touring personnel, those kind of things, because the music industry has its very particular problems around mental health, and what it, the touring life for one, and the other, the kind of the for musicians, the expectations and the difficulties of being a musician, and those kind of things. So it's great. I'm very, very, very fortunate to have had this kind of second thing that I love and that I'm involved in. And yeah, like I said, it's 11 years now that I've been kind of running my private practice, and absolutely love it.
Yeah, brilliant. And like you say, working in music as well with it, like you've had the experience with both, so
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
easy.
it's a very good thing because I think a lot of people, it's hard to understand what the difficulties for musicians and touring personnel is because from the outside it looks like a great life, but actually everything about it is extremely stressful. Yes, there is great bits to it, but a lot of it is very hard, on very hard on the psychology and stress levels. It's difficult.
Yeah, I bet that's probably like 90% of the reason why musicians turn to drugs and drinking. It must be.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, those things that we just kind of assume they do them because they're fun, it really isn't. Those things are coping strategies, to cope with to cope with the stresses, the being away from home, the loneliness, the pressures, just the very fact that your whole circadian rhythm is just shifted into almost working permanent night shifts, and it messes up your body, the travel, the kind of there's no sort of security for a lot of touring personnel and bands. There's the interpersonal difficulties. It's just endless, and it's really very, very far from a normal life, from the things that we need, the safety and security and routine and kind of good sleep and good hygiene habits, all these kind of things. It's so difficult to have on tour. And so it's hard for people outside of that, I think, to understand that. Everybody kind of sees it as, well, it must be exciting and it must be fun. And it's that same thing they were saying to you earlier. Yes, it is the first time you do it. The first time you tour America, it's absolutely amazing. You're just like, wow. And you go into New York and all these places. The second time you do it, a little less so. And the third time you do it, it's like, we've been here, we've done this. It's just, oh, here we go again kind of thing,
Yeah.
it takes a lot to keep doing that. It takes a lot to, a big drive to not kind of lose the impetus and the interest in that.
I'm sure with the bigger bands and the successful bands as well, there's probably a stigma of like seeing them on stage or wealthy or whatever. And it's
Mm.
like you think they've got the perfect life, don't you? But like you
Mm.
say, what's going on in the background with them?
Oh yeah, I mean, the thing that comes with that, I think, is the difficulties in relationships, the difficulties with fame, the difficulty with being well known. I mean, and it's got even worse these days, with social media, with the fact that actually your entire life has got to be on display. That's what people want to see, or that's what they expect. And how do you manage a relationship like that? How do you manage being away? How do you manage just trying to get peace and quiet, flying on a plane when people want selfies all the time? It gets exhausting for people, and of course it just takes that one time when they kind of, somebody loses their shit or just kind of says, leave me alone. Suddenly, bam, it's all over social media,
Yeah.
people are expected to have opinions on everything these days. People are terrified of what they say because they're terrified of being cancelled. It's a very, very difficult environment to operate in. I thank God that mobile phones were not around when we were on tour. You get up to some really stupid shit when you're young and you're taking drugs and drink and dicking about on tour. You do some really stupid shit, and there weren't people with mobile phones around. These days, I don't know, you just have to be on guard the whole time, just watching. As soon as somebody brings out a phone, you must think, oh, for fuck's sake, you can't
Yeah.
be yourself.
Yeah, it must. Yeah, it must be just like you say on 24/7, just that.
Yeah,
I was
yeah. You
relaxing.
have you have to be aware of that all the time. It's bizarre. We used to play gigs and then go into the club afterwards and get, fucked up and act like dickheads. And that's part of the fun. And it's part of the kind of it's part of the rite of passage of everybody these days. But I mean, I don't know these days. I mean, these days if kids go out, is there a bro code about you don't start getting your phone out and when people are kind of doing shit? Do they, I don't know what they do, but that for me would be horrible, just knowing that at any point somebody whips their phone out and starts filming what you're doing. I wouldn't.
Wake up the next morning, you got all these messages on your
Well,
phone.
yeah. I mean, yeah, it's and it can be very vindictive about that, that actually somebody could really fuck you up to, taking photos of you and then sticking, or videos of you and then sticking it all over social media.
Yeah, great.
Um, mm.
So, what's it like juggling that life of a musician and a psychologist at the moment? Then, like, are you enjoying it, the music life more now because you're doing that?
Yeah, I think I am. You know, the just going back into the music is enjoyable just because we've learned about it being the process and the journey being the most important thing, and so being on stage and playing the music is just wonderful. It's brought back that joy of that I think we'd lost. Part of the problem is being involved in the music business is that you're aware that it's a business, and you do feel that pressure. You do feel that kind of sense. So oftentimes I remember being on stage and you could be playing great paces, but you kind of always thinking, so why haven't we sold this venue out? And, this crowd isn't particularly into it. And, and you're just not enjoying the thing that is actually the most joyful thing, which is playing the music, playing with a band, people that you love, and just really enjoying it. And so that's been an enormous change, kind of coming back and doing it again, playing these songs. It's just been the approach to it that's been massive. I think it's probably very grounding to have something else to go back to, to know that okay, it's kind. It sounds weird to sound, but it's kind of like a really enjoyable holiday when we go on tour now. It's just like, right, we're going to go on holiday. We're going to go with a bunch of mates and we're going to play some gigs. It's just going to be a lot of fun and there isn't any pressure and it's good.
Well, when we first got into contact, you were about to go
Mm.
off to Spain. What was that
Yeah.
like?
It was a total shit show.
Really?
Well,
Why?
only because no, it wasn't actually. The gig was fantastic, but what happened was is that we were it was a festival we were doing on the Sunday night, and basically everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. Only in the way that basically we all got there on Saturday evening, I think, and half our gear had gone to Amsterdam. Yeah, so off our gear that was coming with our sound guy had ended up in Amsterdam, and we were just like, shit. Okay, so there was this whole thing about, right, can we cobble together this to manage to do the gig? So our sound man ended up staying at the airport, kind of grabbing some of the essential gear and coming back the next day. And so we didn't really get a sound check, and we were like, fine, we'll manage it. So it was all a bit chaotic. And then we got on stage and we were sort of 3 songs in, gig going really well, and suddenly, boom, all the power just went down. And so we were thinking, shit, what have we done? Everyone's kind of running around trying to get it up. And they got the power up again. And we did another song, and then boom, all the power went down, lights, everything. And so they were trying to get it up and they couldn't get it up. And in the end, we came off stage. And then this promoter came running over and basically said, it's the whole street, it's the whole area's gone out. We don't know what's going on. So all the power had gone down. And they were getting in touch with the local grid, and basically they were kind of saying it's going to be half an hour before it's stable again. So basically, what do we do? So we ended up kind of going on. We finished the gig. It was absolutely brilliant. The crowd were fantastic. We had a great time. But then we had to get up really early to leave the next day. And so it ended up being a really late night. Of course, we were all a bit pissed and hung over the next day, managed to get the flights back. And then I got back and waiting for my guitar to come through on the carousel. Of course, it doesn't arrive. So the thing is that I put an AirTag in my guitar case. So I'm looking and it's just like, oh yeah, it's still in Madrid. So it's like, fuck's sake. So basically I got my guitar back a couple of days later, but it was it's one of those weekends where you just like, yeah, anything that could go wrong did go wrong. But that was brilliant because, back in the day, I think we would have got really pissy about it, but we were just like, yeah, whatever, it's fine. If we can get on stage and we can put a gig out there, we'll do it. And it was brilliant. It really, really was good. The crowd really appreciate that, that we didn't storm off and kind of say, okay, we're not doing this. we just kept going, we kept plowing on, and it was brilliant. It was really, really good. So those sorts of things are that's what we kind of love doing that now. And then it's kind of like, right, back off that into the day job. And it was really, really great fun. Yeah.
I don't know if you'll remember, but a couple of years ago, I saw Boo Radley's at Bingley Weekender. Do you remember that? And he
Which,
bounced it
which,
down.
where was that?
Bingley Weekender. It was a Thursday night. And it proper like
Yes, yes. We played just before Black Grape. Yeah, Black Grape played that night. Yeah,
Happy
yeah, yeah.
Mondays. It was Happy Mondays.
Was it Happy
Yeah,
Mondays?
yeah,
Okay. Yes, and it lashed down, didn't it?
yeah,
It
yeah.
lashed down. Yeah, no, that was a good gig. I mean, we kind of we did a couple that summer that just lashed down, and it's like, oh God, the poor buggers in the audience, it's just we did a couple of festivals and there were two that just got soaked, there was, but yeah, no, that was a great gig. Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Have you had that a lot though when things go wrong, or is it like just once in a blue moon kind of thing?
It is once in a blue moon, really. That this weekend that's just gone was weird. That was a weird one. That's kind of like, yeah, shit goes wrong. I mean, I think that's always the difficulty when you're on a tight schedule and you're dealing with airlines.
Yeah.
It's kind of like you are very dependent on the gear turning up, and it's kind of like, if it doesn't show, you are a bit screwed. There's certain things you can wing, you can borrow guitars and stuff, but there's other stuff that you kind of, like our guitarist pedals, to get certain sounds, he needed them to show up, and it's kind of like when they go missing, it's like, oh bugger, that song's not going to sound very good if we haven't got that pedal or this, it's that kind of thing. But I think we could probably manage it with pretty much with borrowed gear. But no, we've never really had, the only time we ever had a big problem was when we were playing, Blair did a Mile End Stadium gig, and we were supporting them then, and we had an amp go down that we just couldn't get working, and it basically took up about 20 minutes of the set of trying to get this amp working. And so, but no, generally, nothing really does go wrong badly. We've always been, fairly fortunate with that.
Well, since the reunion, you've released a couple of albums, and you've released a new single for a forthcoming album. What can you tell us about that?
Well, the single we released was called Solarcide, and it's kind of it is a bit kind of emblematic of kind of how the album is starting to sound. It's a bit more kind of on the electronic side, a bit more sort of poppy, I guess. It's kind of these three albums have been sort of me, Tim, and Rob writing, and I think one of the things that we tend to do, I think we're a bit more sort of formal in our song structures than Martin was. I think Martin always liked to sort of stay away from those sort of formal song structures, but we're sort of a bit more formal in that. So the album is called In Spite of Everything, and it's going to be released in May, and we're going on tour to sort of promote that over the May sort of weekends. We're going to do that. So we're really looking forward to that. I've been working on that album over the last year. It's pretty much ready to go. We've got kind of the Christmas period. We're probably going to sort of work on it a bit more over then. But it's pretty much sort of ready to go. And, we're really, really pleased with it. There's a great, like everything, we feel there's a great collection of songs there. So really looking forward to that coming out.
Yeah, brilliant. Me too. And have you got many shows like before New Year then, or is it all next year that?
No, it's all next year. Yeah, the Spain was the last one, really. I think people don't tend to do a lot of shows around the Christmas period. I seem to remember back in the day we didn't do a lot around Christmas. It all starts to be kind of Christmas parties and Christmas gigs and stuff. So the first thing we'll do is in February again. So February 7th, we're doing a warm up in Bedford at Bedford Esquires, and then we're off to France again for a week. So this is one of the things that we did in our end of October this year. We went back to France for the first time in 30 years, which was just amazing. The reception there was incredible. We were always really popular there, and we hadn't been back for 30 years, and the reception was just absolutely astounding. It was brilliant. Really loved it.
Well, is it because of that you're going back again, like because of the demand?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Because France is a fairly big country. We only did a week there, so we did 4 shows across France. So we're going to go back and do different areas, and that's what we kind of love doing now, And the great thing is that we're able to sort of play new stuff and old stuff. We've got a massive collection of songs to choose from, so it's good. We really like dipping into it and kind of going, okay, next tour, what should we play that's different, and what should we do this off this album, and we still stick with a lot of the kind of ones that people like, but what we try to do is try to play something off every album. So even Everything's All Right Forever, we still that we try to play something off every single album. Which is we really like doing that. It really sort of runs the gamut of kind of all our stuff.
Well, where can people keep up to date with Boo Radley stuff, like the shows and the upcoming album and stuff?
Social media is the main one. If you look at we've got an Instagram, we're on Facebook, but if the main central point would be the booradleys.co.uk. That's the website, and you can find all the other you can find all the other social media stuff from there. And that's also got links to ticket sales and kind of where to buy vinyl and stuff as well. So that's probably your main point of call.
Yeah, that's right. I'll leave the links in the description for people.
Brilliant, thank you.
Check it all out. But it's been, honestly, I've really enjoyed that episode. It's been brilliant to speak to you.
Thanks, Ethan. Appreciate it. Really appreciate you having me on.
No, honestly, any time. It was great to speak to you and hear about all the stories with the Boo Radleys and where you are now and things. So good luck with everything.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Nice one. Thank you.
No worries.